Hi, everybody. Welcome to Friday Push to Prod, a weekly podcast when we can manage to pull it off on a weekly schedule.
We're 2 for 2.
2 weeks in a row, we're good with
Great.
season 3.
And before that, we were great until we took 2.5 years off.
Until we took a pandemic off.
That's right.
Listen, claim the win.
Claim the win. Yeah, 2 weeks in a row. We're 100% on season 3 thus far.
Woo.
We have a really great topic today. I'm always excited to talk about this end of the industry because it's not one that I get to participate in myself very often, and that is writing for games. We have 2 amazing guests with us today, Amy and Nicole. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in just a second. But ladies, welcome. Thank you for being here. I am very honored anytime anyone says yes to us, so thank you so very much. We'll start with Amy because Nicole's been here before. She knows how this works. Amy, welcome to Friday Push to Prod. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're working on currently.
Thank you so much. My name is Amy Noel Green, and I am a narrative designer and writer for Numinous Games and also for Talofa Games. So 2 very indie studios. With Numinous Games, we just released a title in VR called Area Man Lives. It's been out a week. It was so much fun to write for because we use speech detection. So I got to write lines to respond to players, knowing that they were going to get to improvise what they said and not just like choose them from a click list. So that's kind of been what's been happening. And then with Talofa Games, we're working on a game for runners. It's kind of like an RPG while you go on a run, and it's super fun and exciting. So that's a little bit about what I'm working on.
That sounds very cool. Gamifying fitness. I like it. Not that I do it, but gamifying fitness sounds like fun. Nicole, welcome back. You've been here before. What have you been up to?
Well, for the last 5 years, I've been writing for interactive stories. I essentially take novels and turn them into an interactive story where you can choose what you want to do within the story itself. So take your favorite book. I'm going to take American Gods, for instance, right? So when Shadow goes on his great quest throughout all of the United States and he decides to do one thing or another, what I do is I take that experience and break it down into choices. Do you want to do this thing, or this thing? And then your story progresses based on, the things that you choose. You get to make that story your own.
Very cool. So it's an interactive version of like the old choose your own adventure books?
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, American Gods is absolutely not a thing that I've worked on. Mostly I write romance, but it could be a thing one of these days. One of the most fun things that I did was I adapted a paranormal story. So the main character is like an investigator. And so I got to set up action sequences of if you decide to investigate this, then this is what you find. It was really fun.
Awesome.
Sounds like Dresden Files-esque.
It was. It was
very much
that. It was very cool.
Very cool. Sounds great. Katie, do we need to introduce ourselves? Should we? No?
Sure.
No? Okay, go ahead.
I'm Katie. I'm a community manager, social media manager, influencer manager for all kinds of video games, and I've worked with almost all of these people, most recently with Amy on another project that she's actually working on, which I hope to talk a bit about during this podcast because I think it's amazing. They're making a game for the profoundly disabled, so it's accessible to almost everyone.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
That sounds very cool. Very cool.
I told you they do good things.
They are amazing, no doubt. So I am Rick, of course. I'm currently the director of influencer and community activations at Yellow Pike Media. I have not had the pleasure of working with everybody here, but I've interacted with almost everyone here, including Amy, who may not remember way back when you guys were first writing that Dragon Cancer. We met briefly while I was at Extra Life. So everyone here I've had conversations with professionally at some point, even if we haven't had the opportunity to work together. So this makes me really happy. I want to just start with kind of an overall broad topic.
Because you're with 3 broads, is that why?
Because I'm with 3 broads.
I have
There are
the nose
things
there,
I'm not
buddy.
allowed to say. That's one of the things I'm not allowed to say, but Katie
That's
can
why
get
I
away
said it
with.
for
Katie
you.
can make that joke.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
Yes, exactly. I feel very outnumbered right now. I was outnumbered last week too. This is becoming a theme.
Yeah,
Um,
it's all part of our plan.
Writing for games. Okay. Nicole mentioned you also write novels, right?
I have, yes.
How is writing for games different from other forms of writing? What's the challenges? Nicole, I'll let you go first, and then Amy, you can chime in.
So writing a novel versus writing for games. I'm going to be honest when I say that when I'm writing a novel, I'm writing for me. Also, what I write isn't really thought out. I'm definitely a grower, not a shower, if that makes any sense. Like in novel terms, it means that I sit down at a keyboard and I just type, and the story just kind of flows right out of me. And if you're a shower, that means that you outline everything, you know exactly what's going to happen. Your plot points are, bulleted out, and you hit every single one of those things. So when I'm writing a novel, I don't have, I have a specific audience, obviously, of who I'm writing to versus, or based on the genre that I'm writing. But everything that comes out of that is kind of an amalgamation of me, people that I know, experiences that I've had. It's just flaying it out there. And I think that when you're writing for a game, you are writing to a very specific audience. And you have to take their considerations into what you're going to put down, right? A really good example is I'm old as dirt. I mean, don't let this youthful appearance fool you. When I was a kid, what we called sitting with your legs crossed over each other was Indian style, right? And I had written that down, and one of my editors was like, we call it crisscross applesauce now. And so you're like, oh, right. There is an audience who would look at that and go, that's kind of offensive to me. And you don't want that at all. You want to make sure that, when you're writing, that your audience feels comfortable and engaged in the content that you're putting out there.
Awesome.
Kind of like being a community manager, right? You want to make sure that they're
Exactly, yeah.
engaged and also safe.
Exactly. Amy?
Yeah. So when I think about the difference between writing for games and writing for novels or other things that I've done, it's funny because for a long time I was like, oh, if I could only publish a book, like that would be the thing. And I forever was like, that's the dream. And I'm writing for games and that's all right. But what I love is this other medium. And then a weird thing happened, which is that at the age of 40, I was for the first time in my life diagnosed with ADHD. And so a lot of the ways that my brain naturally works and that I thought was just my personality, I learned was like actually just me being neurodivergent, that like there's a ton of people whose brains work in this specific way. And what was really fascinating about it is I realized that I was like fighting hard in my like just desires that like I wanted to publish books, but I was just working on games. And the more I understood about how my brain has always worked, but I just didn't always think of it as different from other people, what I learned is that the things that happen in writing for games naturally, like just really, really fits my brain. And I was like, oh, I need to lean into this and just love that I get to do this instead of trying to hope it was this other thing. So when I write for games, I get to explore every possible path that we could go down. I get to think through different outcomes. I get to like think through all the different storylines at once and give my player choice. And like with ADD, that's what I do all the time. I'm like, okay, if on the phone that guy says this, then I'll say this. But if he tells me no, then I'm going to say this thing. And if they say this, and like you talk to other people, they don't do that. They just take the phone call as they go. So like it's just a weird quirk of my personality that works so well for games because I really do get to think through like, well, what if the character responds like this? Or what if they don't make the choice I'm expecting? Or, so giving them that choice, getting to explore all the possibilities is a big part of games. And then just mostly I write in response to something. So in a novel, you're deciding everything, but in games, you're always responding to the player. Like, so it almost in that sense feels like writing exercises. Like, what would you do if? And then you write out that part.
It's like an if-then statement. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly. Yes, and.
And then the other big part of it for me is that with games, you're always working with a team. So I have always been stronger at dialogue and really weak in descriptions because I don't like descriptions and they bore me and I don't like to write them. So with
Same.
games, I never have to because I've got a team and I don't have to describe what's happening. The player is experiencing what's happening. They're seeing it. Someone else is building out that part. So I get to focus on the dialogue, which is where I just naturally engage a little bit better anyway.
That's pretty
Very
cool.
cool. Very cool. I never really thought about the piece where you don't have to describe the world that your character's in because the art teams and the world builders have already done that. So your role primarily as a writer is to respond to it and what the character's doing.
Conversations are the interesting part anyways, right? It's not,
Mhm.
I mean, I can't read Robert Jordan because I don't care about 15 pages about the color of that leaf. You know what I mean? But I love the dialogue, and I totally that resonated with me when you said that. Also ADHD, and so I do have those conversations as well, where I'm like, well, if this happens, then this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and you better act this way, or wait, what if you need to act that way instead? And I think that does lend to being able to be creative in that aspect of being able to see all of the possible outcomes of that one conversation.
I have proof that not only do you do that, but you go back after the fact and agonize over everything that has been. I have proof from this morning that you do that.
Absolutely, I do that.
You were like, yesterday when we spoke, when I said this, did you think that? And I was like, no, everything was cool. But I could tell how, like, I felt so bad because how long have you been worrying about, one thing you said or didn't say? Is that
only about 4 hours. That's not that big of a deal.
oh my gosh.
Just the barest and briefest of moments. It's interesting. Both of you mentioned having been diagnosed with ADHD for a couple of reasons. One is we're actually recording this on World Mental Health Day,
Oh,
so I
Happy
think
World
that
Mental
becomes
Health
a
Day, everyone.
very powerful message that people are now hearing. That here are two very accomplished women who state right out there for everyone to know that they have ADHD, and it actually helps them, from the sounds of it, a little bit with the writing you do. Yes, is that an accurate characterization, or does it make
yeah,
it harder in some ways?
it does. Oh, of course. I think that everything's a little bit harder when you're any type of neurodivergent, or even if you have like depression or anxiety, because it all kind of builds up, and you I second guess myself a lot. I've been, before I was a writer for games, I was a community manager, and that was super easy, right? You had like very simple steps: keep everybody happy, report what they want, give them back information. It was fine, except for when they were calling you names. And I said that to Katie this morning. And so I've published 5 books, and I've been writing for my company now for 5 years. And I didn't even think that I was a good writer until maybe year 4. Right? It took me that long to go, wait a second, you're making a lot of money for your company. Your games do very well. You're really good at this. So, but there's a lot of second guessing, right? And you go back and you read a scene, or you read a bit of dialogue, and you have to think about it, right, to see if it's appropriate, or if it's the right path for the characters to take, or if you might be alienating anybody by putting this into that particular spot. So I think that from my perspective, at least, my anxiety does a lot of, I call it my Kevin. My Kevin is that like little voice that's like, ugh, are you going to do that? Is that really the right thing to do? He sounds a little bit like Putty from Seinfeld. Patrick Warburton.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, but that's my own personal experience. Obviously everybody is different in this space.
Yeah, I think that's true. That like, and that's maybe an important message too, is that like people can be diagnosed with the same, disability, and it impacts them in different ways, and they have different strengths and weaknesses. But a lot of disabilities, and ADHD maybe being chief among them, have strong strengths and strong weaknesses. And so I think, like for me, I go, oh, this is like a superpower for games writing. It's not so great for keeping my house clean and remembering to brush my hair. Like there's
What is executive function? I don't even know.
there's some things that are too boring for me to want to engage with, but also there's reasons I didn't know I had ADHD for 40 years. And one is that like I feel like I focus really well. And it took my therapist having ADHD and going, yeah, you tunnel focus. And I went, what is that? And she was like, where you focus on one thing super intensely for a long time and like nothing else matters. And I go, oh, well, how is that ADHD? Like, I focus great. And she's like, unless you need to do more than one thing in your life. But I was like, oh, okay. So anyway, all of that to say, I think there's amazing strengths to be found in all kinds of disabilities. But what helps is learning about how your brain works and how you function, because then you have this self-awareness to go, oh, this type of job is going to work really well for me. And you also have the self-awareness to go, oh, here's where my weaknesses might be impacting people on my team that I don't pay attention to. So ADHD is great for the actual games writing. It can be a little crummy for working with teams, because I do tend to like think through all the potential outcomes of a situation. So when a team is trying to make a decision, I'm like 15 steps ahead and I'm like, oh, well, the obvious answer is this. But like, that doesn't work for a team. Like, a team needs to come to conclusions together, and they don't want someone to race ahead and say, oh, I already thought of that and I took care of it. Like, so there's just things that, like, the more you're aware of your personality and how your brain works, whether you have a disability or not, whether you're neurodivergent or neurotypical, the more you know about how you work, the more you can find those strengths and like really find workplaces and like just orient the kind of work you do towards your strengths and compensate for your weaknesses, be aware of your weaknesses, and talk to people about your weaknesses and ask them to help you kind of like support those spaces. So I oftentimes will say, hey, if I ever come off too pushy, like, just let me know, because I just get excited. And it's not that I'm like really pushy, I'm just really passionate. And so I have people on all my teams who can kind of get in my ear and go, hey, you might want to slow that one down a little bit. And I'll be like, oh, okay, yeah. Like,
That's because your husband is on all your teams. To be fair, he's the one getting in your ear going,
here we go.
honey. Because there are so many times where the rest of the team is going, we love this. And Ryan's going, Amy, 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 and shaking his head.
He worries I'm a liability for him.
He does.
Everyone else is very amused by me. Actually, this is the first few years that I've had a game team that my husband's not on, and that has been really fun for me.
That's good.
That just gives me a whole lot of questions that I'm just going to get crushed by all three of you if I ask them. So I'm just going to move on to the next thought. So I like that you described it, as being able to find your superpower within the ADHD. I think that's really powerful. It's funny. I've never been diagnosed, but I suspect, because both of you just described how I work. So I suspect it's there. Should probably go talk to someone.
My therapist did the same as Amy. She was like, Nicole, you have ADHD. And I went, no, I don't. I'm not hyperactive. I don't understand what you're talking about.
And Nicole, don't feel bad. I do exactly what you do. I will have this podcast in the can, and for the next week, I'll be like, I should ask this. I didn't do that. Why did I say it this way? That was a weird turn, and I'll just do it all week long until the next one.
The big thing that was my signaler is that I'll start to tell you a story, and instead of just telling you one story, I'll tell you 10 stories, and then swing back around an hour later. Right. And get to the point
of that original story. Oh yeah, then that's why I got whole milk instead of 2%.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And now I know 5 family members.
Yeah.
Right, but you're right. It does. It works really well for games because I'm already telling 10 stories. I might as well just write all those 10 stories down.
That's great.
Oh, it's so funny because you hear yourself going and you're like, this is too long. They just wanted to hear the end. And I'm like, but they need to know all that. And they don't. I know they don't, but I can't shut myself up. They still get every piece of it, whether they wanted it or not.
But, and this is really important, is that at the end, you diverge back into your original story. And games do that, right? They'll take you off a little paths, but essentially you have to come back into that main point.
Side quests are fine. It's just make sure you get back on the main quest to move the story forward.
Right, exactly.
Gotcha.
I thought we were going to be talking about like who our favorite games were.
So we were, but you know what? Apparently we've been dragged off on a side quest.
How
but it's good because I think it's an important conversation. I really do feel it's important.
No, absolutely. I think in mental health, talking about mental health and making it less of a stigma is essential to our society, right? A really good example, I think, is the love letters. And I was just reminded of that this morning as I was reading an article. And I was like, man, empathy and talking things out so that people are like, oh, I'm not alone, is super important. And I think that as game developers, we're getting so much better at pushing that message forward than we've ever been.
I agree. I think there is an okayness now within game dev to talk about and discuss and create narratives and storytell around those issues more and more.
The
And
pandemic, for as horrible as it is, and it's horrible, has done us a service of
talking
there.
about those things, yeah.
There are a whole lot of people who are not okay anymore. Like, they thought they were okay because life was going on as normal, and then suddenly everything crashed. And people started realizing, holy crap, I am not okay. And it became okay to talk about that. And that is not only beautiful, but super important.
And can I just say that prior to the pandemic, that Dragon Cancer did a lot to move video game okayness for talking about those things that,
Absolutely.
I thought video games were just like shooting my friend in the face or clicking on things to solve puzzles. I didn't know that we could actually, I mean, there have been emotional games but I think it ushered in, or just maybe just kind of was coming through at the same time in this era of games that are, yeah, very self-aware. Like, I'm going to butcher any names I try to remember around the same time, but for those of you who are listening who have played that Dragon Cancer, I commend you for playing it. I've told this to Amy. She knows. I didn't want to play it. I did want to play it and didn't at the same time, because it's tough. Like, it's tough to. But I also, when I was finished, and I've told her this too, I felt so honored that Brian and Amy and the team shared what they did with the world, because what an incredible thing to just bear witness to, not just pain, but hope and grace. And it's just so full of the best of humanity, I guess, is what I want to say. And I felt honored that I got to know Joel that way. That's who the game's about. So I was like, this team is doing things that, it's kind of the opposite of what video games maybe started out to do, but it's like other art forms. You can delve into these corners where, that may not be the first thing you think about when you've set up an easel and take up a paintbrush, but then we all know artists, and we've seen things that people have poured their heart and soul into, and that's what that Dragon Cancer did. And there are other games around since then and around that time that kind of delve into other areas of what it is to be human. And I just love that. Anyway, that was a long way of me saying thank you, Amy, for that game and all your games.
Definitely, Amy. Thank you very much. And to anyone listening who hasn't played it, I would personally recommend that you do. Just be aware that it is very raw and emotional, almost from the moment you start and
Play
all the
with
way
a
through.
friend if you can, even if it's online together. I grabbed my son and said, I cannot play this alone. You need to play it with me. And he did. And he said to me, I'm glad I played this with you, and I'm glad I didn't play it alone. I'm glad you didn't play it alone. So that was kind of cool too. So yeah, just play it just know what you're getting into.
And
Know what you're getting into.
It's wonderful.
Expect a cry fest, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly.
yeah, it's just one of those games that I'm trying to think of the other one. There was a game called something in the woods about mental health as well, and I can't remember the name. But yeah, there have been so many great games that it just kind of examines the deeper meaningfulness of what we're doing in a game, rather than just let's explore this old house. Well, we're going to find something. It's going to take us back into the past and relive that memory, or something like that. Like, I love stuff like that now. I love being part of an industry that's actually you know going full steam ahead with that kind of thing.
Definitely. I have a question kind of built out of this mini conversation. And it's like, is it challenging, especially for you, Amy, having done something like that Dragon Cancer? Is it challenging when the narrative of whatever game you're working on starts hitting personal notes like that? Or is, in the case of that game, wholly built on your personal life and experiences?
That is such a great question. You know, when we made that Dragon Cancer, we knew that's what it was going in. So I think there are a lot of games where you kind of find the story as you go. And I expect that if the story stumbled into a territory that was very personal and I didn't see it coming, that could be really challenging. But for that Dragon Cancer, it was just it was this thing we could do. Like when you're in the middle of tragedy and you're in the middle of a really hard thing, there's so much agency that feels like it's totally stolen from you. Like you have so many bad choices and so few good choices. There's so little that you can do that you feel like you have control over. And so being able to kind of explore this like personal, I mean, really, we were exploring our suffering in a video game, which is really like, that's a lot to do, but it gave purpose for us to like what we were experiencing and what we were doing. And in some ways, I think helped to dampen the experience a little bit. That sounds strange, but I'm one of those people who like, it is hard for me to feel sorry for myself and cry for myself. But if I watch a video of someone who went through exactly what I went to, I could cry buckets of tears for them. And I would know it was for me too, but it would be hard for me in the moment to really feel that.
So you're giving yourself permission almost.
Yeah, I think creating that Dragon Cancer was like, oh, like there's a value to processing this. Like we are processing this to create something. I mean, which really like actually I've learned in therapy that's one of the ways that you help process grief well so it doesn't become trauma is that you create something with it because it helps you analyze it in a way that feels kind of controlled.
It's also massive group therapy when you think about it, right? Because we've literally, I could have met you in grief therapy and you could have told me your story that way, but instead I've been through it with you or feel like I have all over again.
Was the process cathartic for you? Like when you were done, you were like, oh, I got this out.
I don't know. We ask that a lot and I never know. I think that the outcome afterward was very cathartic for us. So I don't know. We were just so driven to do it in the moment that it was kind of like, what else would we do? And I think we didn't really know how much we were processing. And like, because it's not like I experienced the loss of a child with and without that to compare the two. But I know that right. Ooh, oh, don't ever want to do that again. And it always is in the back of my head that there are no guarantees in life and you just don't know. And you just go, ooh, like you want to believe that like we're all allotted some amount of suffering. And once you've done it, you're free. But that's
the gambler's fallacy.
That's not how it works.
Just bubble wrap all your children and keep them home and they'll be fine.
Everything will be fine. No more harvest for us. But I would say the process afterward, like when people interview us about the game or invite us to come and speak about the game, the conversations with people who have played, all of that has been very cathartic because we have just been given this gift that people ask us about Joel or they tell us like, oh, I miss Joel. And I love that because I miss Joel and I love that someone who never met him can miss him too. And it feels like I'm getting to share that grief like among a bigger group of people. So that process has been very cathartic. Just the conversations. I mean, a lot of times people will play and then, you know, they'll meet us somewhere and come up and hug us and then tell us their grief story. And like all of that has been just so lovely. And like, I can't imagine doing this any other way now.
So as a community manager, I want to say something and then I have a question from that, which is working with Numinous as your CM, I got to see comments and feedback and engagement on that Dragon Cancer as well. And I never saw your game sucks or your writer was crap like I have on every other game I've worked on. Like I've worked with writers who have I won't name them here, have gotten death threats for the way a game ended or this, you know, oh, the sequel and final game and you ruined it. And, you know, who literally don't put their face and name on the About Us page of our teams because they don't want people to know where they've gone next to work, that kind of thing, which is horrible. But having worked for every other company in the world that gets bad with good and gets trolled and then having worked and seen every single piece of engagement about that Dragon Cancer, no one would ever dare I can't imagine you ever saw anybody say, oh, well, the experience only sucked because it made them feel feelings maybe, or because they didn't have enough Kleenex, but it
Right.
wasn't like, how dare you make this game? Like, you did not get trolled. Thank God. Thank goodness. And I want to say in your writing, and you too, Nicole, because the stuff you're writing, you have to think about this a lot. Do you write not only with your audience in mind, but with your audience's potential negative reaction in mind? Like, does that inhibit your writing?
It does. You know what? I love it when people cry and then they come back to me and they're like, Nicole, you made me cry. And I'm like, yes. And I don't know if it's a little bit of evil in me, but I know that personally, when something elicits such a volatile emotion within me, that takes talent, right? That takes talent on the writer's end to make me feel a certain way. If I make them feel empathy or sadness or even anger, like hopefully they're not angry at me, but angry at the situation and they want it to change, that is amazing. And that is like that is what I want. I mean, I want to be able to elicit those emotions. Like I said, I came prepared to talk about my favorite game writing, and a lot of people were like, really, Nicole? But Final Fantasy 14 has some of the best game writing for an MMO that I've ever seen. I remember playing through that first 50 levels of the main story quest, and I broke down sobbing. And I did it again, coming back like a couple expansion packs later, where I was a sobby mess for like an hour, and I was like, those guys are brilliant. So I think that that's always like a really, I think it's a good thing. Did that answer the question? I don't know. I kind of got.
No, it
Don't do
absolutely
that.
did.
Oh, people are going to be like, why don't you write the final book, Nicole? Where's that book?
So Nicole, why don't you write the final book? I have to say, I love Grace, your title, like your lead character from your books. I love her, and it's weird
It's
because
you love me.
no, it's not. And I've told you this before. I started reading it because I loved you, and then about 3 chapters in, I stopped and I went, "Oh shit, Nicole wrote this." Like I forgot that it was friend I loved writing the books, and I just love the books. I love the character. I love the story. It was so much fun, and she's so much like you, and you and I are like, so she's so much like me, and I just enjoyed every minute. And yes, I felt her frustration and her loneliness and I cheered when she was victorious because I could really relate. So you did invoke real emotions, and it wasn't just because, oh, hey, Nicole's not that bad a writer, even though she's my friend and I know her. It's like, this book is really good, and also it's written by my friend Nicole.
So I'm going to be completely honest with you and my 3 fans who are still holding out for like that book. I'm a little gratified. Like, I mean, still, it's been 5 years since I published anything, and they're still like, "Hey, no pressure, but are you going to put that?"
We want to know how it all.
It's like the final. I know how it ends. I know how it starts, and I know how it ends. But that middle part isn't coming to me, and I'm having a really hard time tying it up because I don't know, creative. Well, maybe I'm using all of my creativity for my job. But on the other hand, like I said in the beginning, I'm a grower, not a shower. And that middle part is just not
growing.
It's not growing for me. And so I don't want to force it. I mean, I could force something out but I think that people, and this works in work too. If I force something, people can tell. They can tell that it's not a genuine, this came to you and you felt inspired by it. At least I can always tell that when I'm reading and I'm like, oh yeah, she wasn't feeling this. She was trying to wrap this up and, get on with the next book. So,
yeah, you don't want to give it the George Martin treatment. That's
definitely not.
Right.
Amy, no, I'm sorry, Nicole. Go ahead, finish.
I was like, so that was it. That's why the last book hasn't come out. I can't even remember what the original question is. ADHD.
That's my fault.
There it is in practice. Amy, I'm just going to back up a little bit because I thought it was a good question, and I'm not going to challenge Nicole openly about Final Fantasy 14 as I. What is an example of really exceptional video game writing, in your opinion? The game you look at and said, I wish I wrote that.
That is such a good question. Okay, this is going to be just because it's not my style, and I wish it was. But I loved playing through Florence because, like, it's not a dialogue heavy game, but it's a narrative game. But everything that's happening, the story's being told through the mechanics, and the mechanics are making you feel what's happening. And it's just them. It's them showing, not telling. And so that's something that I play that, and it's so simple and sophisticated, but it gets its point across so clearly. And so yeah, I don't know. Like I get that that's a weird thing to say, because I'm like, ooh, the one that was like designed as a narrative experience, but without a lot of writing. But that's because I go, oh, there's something to that where we can say as little as possible, but treat each of the game mechanics like a metaphor or like a poem, like something that gives you a way to feel what I want you to feel. Like, so to me, that is a game that was definitely had a narrative designer, like designing the experience, but they were not communicating through dialogue. So I love that. And it's a thing where I go, man, one day I'd like to see how much we could communicate without dialogue, even though that like gives a lot of my work to like other people.
Have you played Journey?
I have seen people play Journey, so I've watched my husband and kids play Journey, but I have not personally played it. But I think that's a very similar thing where like it's designed to evoke all of the emotions and take you through a narrative experience, but without speaking.
Yeah, Annapurna is very good at that. They're just a great studio for that.
They're very reminiscent of something, to jump over to film for a minute. I don't know if you've seen the Robert Redford film Lost at Sea, or All Is Lost, I think.
I don't think no.
There's virtually no dialogue. It's just him on a sailboat and they're lost. And there's no dialogue. It's you experience.
It's a great way to spend a Friday night.
It's not. I don't recommend getting out the popcorn for it,
Right.
but it's excellent storytelling, despite the absence of dialogue.
You have to be in the perfect mood for something like that.
Yeah, and I think what Amy just described is the same thing. There's a way to tell a story without words that is just as powerful. And I guess this leads to my question of, when writing dialogue specifically, and this is for both of you, is there a point where there's the question you leave unasked or unanswered because it furthers the story?
That's such a good question. And I think there's so much that like I naturally just want to like, I want to tell the story through the dialogue because I want to control the story. Like I don't want to leave it up to the programmers and the artists and the musicians. Like they won't do it as well as if I just get to like say it. Which is why I'm like so inspired by that kind of thing. I'm like, oh, someone designed it and then trusted their team. And I think leaving questions asked and not answered also requires you to trust the player. Like, are you going to trust the player that they're going to wrestle with that question and come to their own conclusions? I'll say that like when we started making that Dragon Cancer, we wanted to give people answers. Like, okay, like suffering is hard, but here's the takeaway. Here's the lesson. Here's the answer. And when we started making it, our son was sick, but we had seen all these like amazing, miraculous things happening. And we thought we were going to tell this like triumphant story of him beating cancer. And when that wasn't what happened, we had all these questions and we realized we couldn't make a game that gave anyone answers because we didn't have those answers to give. So that was maybe just a good experience in saying, you know what? We don't have to offer answers. Like people don't even necessarily want them. So I think sometimes my downfall is trying to give people the answers they don't want, like realizing they'd rather think it through. They'd rather come to their own conclusions. So I think that is strong writing. I think it is challenging writing because of that desire to like, no, I want to lead you there. But like people enjoy experiences more when they lead themselves somewhere, when they're exploring instead of following.
I think at heart, I'm a happily ever after kind of person. But everybody's happily ever after is absolutely different, right? And so you have to leave that open-ended so that they can come to their own conclusions. My second book ended on a cliffhanger. And I got so beat up for that. And please mind you that this was over 10 years ago, right before, people were dropping 5 books a year. So it ended on a cliffhanger, and I got so beat up for that. And I was like, but don't you want to ache with that curiosity of what's going to happen next? Because I love that. I love being left on the edge of my seat, agonizing whether or not these characters are going to pull through or not.
But
The reality is no, they don't.
Because how long until we get the third book? That's the problem, right? It's
Well,
fine if we know it's only a couple of months, but 5 years? No, thank you.
No, that third book came out like 6 months later. Maybe
But Nicole,
8.
that's forever in the
No,
Netflix
that's
world
better.
now. Look, I have 30 seconds between episodes.
We didn't
and I
find
stress
out
there,
who shot
right?
JR for at least 4
Least.
months,
Yeah.
Right.
right? We
Right.
didn't know, like all summer. What did we do? We played on our bikes and just prayed for the best anyway. But
I think that immediate gratification has risen to become, people think that it's their right now, right? And so the delayed gratification, which is actually sweeter in the end, seems abhorrent, right? I can't believe I have to wait this long. And I'm guilty of the same thing. Like, right when I'm waiting for new episodes of the Umbrella Academy to drop, because they left, that last season on a, oh my gosh, everything is totally wrong now. Or one of my favorite shows, Sex Education. Like, I have no idea what the main character is going to do now. So, and as soon as I'm done with that, I'm like, oh, I need to know that now. But for the year it takes for that new series to drop, I get to think about it, and I get to imagine and be curious about what all of the possibilities are.
if you're my age or older, you get to forget it all and wonder what happened.
Right.
Wait, what?
Right?
Were
You
they
can't remember
doing?
anyways. You have to watch the recap.
No, absolutely. I'm probably getting a little preachy about it, actually, which I apologize for. But I think that that there has to be a middle ground, and so I do think that leaving people on a bit of a what happens next is always a good thing, because it allows them to be curious, and it allows them to explore what they want to happen.
But it's so interesting that there's people who want that experience and are so excited for it, and people who just don't. Like, so Airy Man Lives came out last week, and a whole part of the story is figuring out what the story is. Like, wait, what is happening here? What's happening? Like, and it's wild because some people are just loving that, and some people are like, I still don't understand what they're trying to do. And I'm like, I know. Like, I love that you're trying to piece together exactly what are they trying to do, because, like, to me, that's part of the narrative puzzle. So, like, it's a game that has puzzles, but it also has this narrative puzzle of, like, if you can piece this story together and figure out what's happening, that's part of it.
And it's nothing that's been done before. So it's like, what?
It's super weird.
And as a player, I appreciate those games all the more, because in a lot of ways, films that I prefer are the same. I don't, get rid of the exposition, please. Right? It's like, I don't need you to tell me what I'm supposed to be thinking. In fact, I don't know what I'm supposed to be thinking. And I like that fact, because I'm thinking my own thing, and whether I'm right or wrong is part of the experience. And the same thing's true about games, in my opinion, the way I play through them. It's like, I want that. Yeah, I got it. Or, oh, wow, I never saw that coming. That to me, even more so, sorry, Nicole, than if you can make me cry or laugh or whatever, if you can get me twisted up to the point where I don't know and I'm excited to find out because I can't figure, that's huge for me as a player.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's because everything's so formulaic now, right? Like, what's the saying? Everything's already been written.
Everything old is new again, or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we go into mysteries, and we're like, oh, we already know who the bad guy is. So I think that's why M. Night Shyamalan was so popular, because nobody saw that coming, and that surprise was just exhilarating.
I actually referenced that in the chat earlier.
Oh, well,
yeah, I love telling people that the movie Arrival is about the mother-daughter relationship, and people are like, what? What are you talking about? I'm like, I got to the end of that movie. I've seen it 3 times. The second time I got to the end, I'm like, this is literally all I want to do is see this with my daughter. And then I finally, the third time I saw it with my daughter, and at the end, I'm like, what do you think that movie was about? She's like, I don't know, aliens. I'm like, no, it's about how much I love you. That's literally all it's about, is how
Yeah.
much I love you. She's like, huh? Oh, I see. I'm like, you'll get it. You'll get it.
And she will.
She has now, right? But
Yep.
yeah, it's just you take pieces of it. Doesn't even have to be the whole film, like Rick said. Just even a piece of it that you're kind of walking along and like that little seed they planted in your brain, and you're like,
Give me something for my brain to chew on while I'm doing the other things that you've laid out for me.
Yes.
Yep.
Either consciously or subconsciously, if you can make my brain just gnaw away at something, especially if I turn the console off or shut the PC down for the night and I'm going to bed and you're brushing your teeth, getting ready for bed, and you say, I still don't get why
Yes.
this.
and
Yes.
that's what Area
That-
Man Lives will do to you.
Really?
Do you have a VR rig? Because you should play it, because it's pretty.
I just had a long conversation
It'll
with someone
tickle
about
your
how
brain.
they should convince me not to buy VR, and you're not helping the
Oh,
conversation.
shoot.
Get it. Get it.
So yeah, so we're kind of getting close on time, and I had two thoughts that I really kind of want to get feedback on from you guys, and that's number one: have you ever had to write for an IP, like a third party IP, small or large, and you had to write a character that was established and well known, and how does that change your approach?
So I have novels. So all of my projects are IP projects, and we have had players who come in and go, "This is not what happens in the book. You got rid of this entire thing, and this was my favorite part, and you didn't even show it in this game." And they were really angry about that. But the reality is that, aside from contracts where you can only use like 15% of the source material straight up, there's a difference between what you can show somebody in a novel or a comic book or even a movie versus the mechanics of gameplay. There are limitations. So you have to choose the best. You have to make the best decisions with the material that you have, and I don't know, hope for the best. Fingers crossed.
Okay. I guess my follow up to that one is, and I imagine it would be hard because it's almost feels like a no win scenario, right? I mean, it is the Kobayashi Maru of writing. You're going to 50-50, you're going to piss people off, right? Because you're going to get that feedback of that's not the character, that doesn't fit either existing established canon in their opinion, or worse, it doesn't fit my head canon. And now you're a horrible person, right? I mean,
There is
that fair?
absolutely no way I would work on any of the Star Wars games. Are you kidding me? Those
Oh,
people,
come on. That's because you're like a super fan. You wouldn't even be able to keep yourself happy. Are you like a massive Star Trek head?
I am a massive Star Trek head,
Yeah.
and I worked for Cryptic Studios when they were developing Star Trek Online, and yeah.
I worked on a Star Trek game, and those fans, you can't.
I had one of those fans tell me that I should just kill myself and save the developers.
We got called monkey butts a lot.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
that's the nice way of saying
Um,
it.
but-
We used
but
to
I think
print
that-
out. We used to print out and frame the things that fans said. Like the worse they were, the more quickly it would get printed out, framed, and hung on the office wall because
Right.
we considered it a badge of honor. Because Star Trek fans are.
But
And
I
then I
think
worked
that
on
Star
Game
Wars
of Thrones
fans are even
because I'm a
worse.
masochist.
To be honest, I really do. I think that those guys, I feel
Only because-
nothing but empathy for the.
Only because there's
Star
good
Wars.
stuff coming out in the Star Trek universe right now, so they don't have as much to complain about us. I don't know.
Don't even get me started on the Star Trek stuff that's coming out right now. I'm so jazzed.
It's so good.
It's
Amy,
so
have you
good.
worked on another IP?
I haven't. So I have not worked on another IP. The closest is like right now, just in spare time, I'm working on a spec script for TV. So that is a place where you have to say, okay, like I'm writing
Yeah.
for an established show with established characters, and like it's just one of those things where you go, that character would say it that way, and you're always questioning, do I know that character well enough? Because when you invent the character, no
Right.
one but
No one
you
questions that.
really knows. But then if it's someone else's character, I think that's always hard because you want to honor what they're doing and you don't want to miss something. You don't want to say, I don't know, you don't want to say things that aren't in their voice. And
Their
I think it's
grandma, yeah,
challenging.
like I'm going to my grandma's. Their grandma died 3 years ago.
Yes. Oh, yep.
Nice,
Yes.
nice. I guess the similar question is because when I asked the question, I was thinking like, major third party, well known IPs, like Lord of the Rings and Star Wars and Star Trek and things like that. But I guess the other half of that question is, have you ever been called in to write for or rewrite an existing storyline for a game? To where Nicole wrote the cliffhanger. Now, Amy, you're writing the follow up book, right? Or you're writing the sequel game because they didn't rehire the previous team, or it's gone to another studio and it landed in your lap.
I've done that. In my current job where writers have like moved to other projects or they, the voice just wasn't there, and so I've jumped in and did a little bit of script doctoring. I guess that's what it's called. Like when somebody else comes in, they do a little bit of script doctoring and tune it, fine tuning.
How does it make you feel as an author? I mean, because you have to accept that probably somewhere down the line, someone's going to end up script doctoring your stuff, right?
It's hard. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't read anything that gets published that I've written that anybody else touches. So once I hand it over to the editor or the narrative designer who's editing for me, that's it. I'm done with it.
Oh, wow.
Because they do change a lot, right? Like, they're like, oh, maybe it needs to be tweaked right in this area. Or if they'll change a sentence and I'll look at something and there's like this, I can't remember what the word is right now. I'm having a senior moment. But I'll look at the sentence and it doesn't look like my words. And so it feels wrong, if that makes sense. I'm just like, wait a second, this isn't what I wrote. This isn't me. Am I having an out of body experience? And then, I spiral.
So you kind of feel disjointed.
It is, yeah, definitely. So I tend to just, I let it off into the universe and let it take on a life of its own. And then I move on to the next thing.
That may be why you hear about actors and actresses who won't watch their own work either, because the editing or the...
Is it dysphoria? Dysmorphia?
Dysphoria, maybe.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Dysmorphia is when we look at ourselves in the mirror and think we weigh 500 pounds.
Right. There's just that moment where you're just like, that's not me. That didn't come from my soul. And so we're rejecting it. Which is super unhealthy. I don't recommend anybody acting like that. It's super unhealthy, and I'm completely neurotic about it.
So I guess my final question here, and once again, I appreciate both of you taking the time to do this. Like I said at the start, before we started recording, this tends to be free flowing, so it may not have been exactly what you thought when it came in, but I think we've had really good conversations, and I feel like, unfortunately, in the world today, I would be totally remiss not to ask the question about the challenges you've both faced being women in this industry, specifically as writers, and any advice you could give to anyone that's listening to this. Maybe there's a young woman out there that's singing, I really want to work in games, I really want to write, and they're going to hear what you say and say, you know what, I'll make sure I watch out for that, but now I know how to get around it. Help them out.
Heavy last question.
Right?
I'll go
Right?
first.
Here's the next hour.
Put me on a
I
spot.
suspect Nicole has like better stories than me, so we'll let it end with hers. I've had the privilege of working on 2 smaller game teams that are just like creating the most like warm and welcoming and supportive environment that like are very intentional about like just caring for the team. So I have not had like bad experiences as a female and a writer in games. But I will say that I think I spent years undervaluing myself because within games, programming is king. And you just think, I'm not technical, so what I'm offering isn't as important. Like, I can't program it, so what I'm doing, anyone could do. And that's a problem. Like, so that is, I guess, one of the things people do without recognizing they do it, which is frustrating, is everyone thinks that they should be able to chime in on the writing because everyone can write. So I've written a story and you've written a story, so we can all chime in. And sometimes that gets really frustrating because I would never look at someone's code and be like, hold on, I think I have a like snappy solution for that. And so that is maybe a little bit tricky, that sometimes you have to have a little bit more just boundaries around your work because everyone wants to chime in and they want to be part of the creative process. But if you're actually designing a story, that there's a lot you're thinking about that other people probably are not keeping in mind and not thinking about when they want to chime in. But for me, a lot of it was just learning to value my contributions to games and to give myself credit for them, and to realize like, oh, I'm a game developer and I'm a designer and my writing is significant and it matters. And I've maybe swung too far the other direction because now I tell my husband all the time, like, we could change programmers in the middle of the project and you get the same project, but if you swapped me for another writer, this game totally changes. So now I've maybe elevated my own importance. But I do think it's just one of those things that's, it's hard to get over that hurdle of saying, you know, like, oh, it only matters in games if I'm a programmer, if I'm technical, if I can do that work. But I mean, narrative design, you have to be able to think technically, and you're thinking through all of the mechanics and you're thinking about how to incorporate what the game is doing with what the writing is doing, make sure they're supporting each other well. And it's complicated and not everyone can do it. And so that's kind of my takeaway, that like, don't minimize your contributions.
Imposter syndrome is so prevalent with women in our industry. We all think that, you know, we're not good enough, we're not quite good enough, but that's false. It's a false dichotomy, and we need to stop doing that. I was a community manager before I started on at this job, and was also treated like, you know, or felt like I wasn't as important because I wasn't a programmer. I think that just being centered in that knowledge that you have something to offer, and, you know, just, I don't want to say stand your ground, but, you know, just have that belief in yourself that you can make it. That's really super important. Belief in your talent is important as well, because Amy's right. Her project would be completely different if somebody else stepped in. So yes, that's exactly right. Like when movie studios thought they could get rid of the writers, how silly were they? You know, we lost a lot of good shows that year. But
Yeah.
Exactly.
it's I don't know. That's such a hard question, because it's just a hard question, and I'm gonna can I pass? Can I hard pass on that one?
You're
You can
good.
absolutely hard pass on that.
Thank you.
I think both of you gave honestly really good answers. It is a hard question.
Mhm.
It was meant as a hard question because it's a hard industry, and a lot of that is external to our studios. Some of it is definitely internal to our studios. I mean, we could all probably name a bunch of bad actors right now if we really wanted to.
But
We'd
we
never have
never
another
would.
guest, but we could do
Right.
it. Um, and I think we're all hard on ourselves. I think imposter syndrome, maybe it's something in the games industry. It seems to attract people with a lot of self-doubt.
Well, I mean, we're doing something that literally everyone in the world wishes they could do. We're
Mhm.
it'd be like working designing action figures or something. Like, you know what I mean? Like, think of something that just feels like you're playing all day, and then try to tell people that you're actually not playing all day when you're
We're
working.
the
Like,
NASA astronauts of the 60s, right?
yep,
We're doing
yep.
something that everybody thinks is super cool, and that they wish they could just do, like, and everybody thinks that they could do it. Like, I used to write in forums, and so therefore I can totally do this thing. And you're like, oh, honey, I wish
Sure
I
you
could.
can, but you won't want to after about
Right.
15 minutes. It
15,
takes a
yeah,
certain
right.
type of, I like what Amy said, that you have to value yourself equally with any other contributor to the team, that because that's the sum part, you're one of the sum parts of the game, and an important
Absolutely.
one. And I like what Nicole said, which is you may have imposter syndrome, but you've been hired to do this job for a reason. They didn't just say, "Oh, you look cute, let's hire you." Like, you literally had to do something to get yourself hired,
Hopefully
and
they
now
didn't do
and
that.
now do that thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, you've been doing it now for 3+ years, so stop thinking you shouldn't be doing, or 4, or whatever it has been. Stop thinking you shouldn't be doing that thing.
Oh no, I absolutely should be doing that thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although, I mean, another thing is that you're right, being in the games industry is hard. My son wanted to be in the games industry, and I steered him way far away.
I did
I
the
was like,
opposite.
baby, you don't want this kind of stress. Like, I don't think that people understand
Yeah.
the level of stress and expectation.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I would say, just from my experiences and just from what I've seen in the industry, if you're a woman going into the games industry, it's that much harder. I think, and I'm going to put a lot of it on the
Easier
fans.
now.
It's much easier now. I'm going to put a lot of it on the fans.
Don't scare them off. Rick,
Wildly
we need them.
unpopular.
What are you doing? Stop it.
Because I have seen far too many people just in my career doing what I do, where if I say it, I get a total pass. Doesn't matter. Yeah, we trust Rick. Rick's great. If a woman were to say that, and I'm going to say it again, and those of you that are listening, look, I'm an over 50 white guy, and there is everything win about that in our society currently, and I get away probably saying things that, even if I were still me in every respect and personality and everything, if I were just Hispanic or Asian or African American, I would not be allowed to say these things, just period, flat out. I would be challenged and questioned just because of that. And I think it's something the industry has to really kind of consider. How long do we let external forces influence who we put in roles? How long do we let external forces influence the mental health of our employees before we say, some of these people don't belong in our community. Some of these people don't deserve a voice, because it's not a voice. It's just hate, or it's misogyny, or it's all of these things that are not contributing positively to the creation of our games. They're not telling stories that,
Reflect
do
us
anything
all.
for us.
Mhm.
Right.
And if you
they're
stop scaring them off, they'll all join our teams.
right. Exactly.
It is
I have
better
had
now. It is
amazing women that I have worked with who would not speak publicly for the simple reason that they didn't want to take the hit.
Mm-hmm.
And that has to change.
Yep.
And the only thing worse than taking the hit for speaking out is to be ignored completely and entirely, and to not even be there. Right,
Yeah.
Amy?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is I'm like, oh, that's so hard, because then they lose their voice entirely for fear of not being heard. And sometimes, I mean, I always think it's trippy as a woman. Like, I think this happens to everyone, that sometimes you say something, or you suggest something, or you say, oh, I've thought this through. I really think we need to make this decision or go in this direction. And nobody's ready to hear it. And 3 weeks later, it comes up again, and someone else says it, and we're all ready to hear it.
Yeah.
So hard as a woman not to go, is that because I'm a woman, and when I said it, they didn't believe it, and when Bob said it, it's a good
Or
idea.
did you plant the seed?
Yes. And so you kind of have to stop and go, maybe we just hadn't all gotten there yet. Like, we all needed to experience and think about it longer. And then I mean, that's where maybe my ADHD meets being a woman, which is like, how much did I jump to the conclusion and not let everyone go down the path till we got there together? Or like, how much was, like, they needed to think it over for a while? And how much of it is being a woman? Because like, we all hear those stories from other women too, but it's just one of those things where like, it probably doesn't do anyone any good to assume that it's rampant sexism. Like, trying to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, trying to assume that we're all doing our best, and that when you see patterns, then like, a lot of people are really great when you go, hey, I noticed that like, when I talk, this thing happens. Like, can you like help me figure out how to communicate better? That, what, like, there's just ways to kind of bring things up that people are willing to hear, that can help you in those situations. But I'm guessing the less defensive we are, the better it works for everyone. And that's hard, because part of you wants to go, maybe I should be allowed to be defensive. Maybe I should be allowed to be frustrated. But I think it's hard as a woman to tell, like, is this because I'm a woman, or is this just humanity? And we're all going to take some time to like accept new ideas either way.
I've had it happen in the same meeting. same marketing meeting where I'm like, you know what? If we position it this way, if we literally use these 3 words and no one answers me, and then 10 minutes later, white guy will say, let's use these 3 words and position it this way. And instead of saying, right, what Katie just said, they're like, good, Alex, that's excellent. And I'm just like, yes, that Alex. And I'm just like, and I have literally gone back and said, Alex, you heard me say that, right? And he's like, yeah, but I don't think they heard you. He always says, I don't think they heard you. And I'm like, you're making my point for me. You're literally,
I think what needs to happen,
what he says. So
I hate that I have to say this, but I think that what has to happen is that those white dudes need to go, maybe you didn't hear what Katie said. We need to use these 3 blah, blah, blah.
Instead of taking the win and saying, that was a great idea, so if I say it, everyone will get on board. Hey, guys, Katie just said this.
Yeah.
Right.
Or let's circle back to Katie's idea. I like someone hopping in and going, "Ooh, I love that. Say it again, Katie." Like, things like that. If you think someone's not being
Which
heard.
is what, to be fair, which is what Ryan and Mike and Josh at Numinous do. And whenever I said anything, if there was chatter, or Ryan would stop and he'd say, let me think about that. Like, I always felt heard and seen at Numinous. Those guys, literal guys, were excellent to work with.
They're all much more sensitive and supportive and wonderful than I am.
Good.
I'm the liability on the team. I'm the one who's a little inappropriate, a little funny, but I get to get away with it because they're all so sensitive and careful, and so I love that dynamic. But
by the way, right now, I have to say, as a contractor doing indie games, I can pick and choose who I work with, and the teams I've picked and chosen are all excellent at this. Stoic is amazing at this. We have a hugely diverse team, and everybody feels, I hope, equally heard and seen. The guys at Blue Wizard, and there's lots of them, they're excellent with how they respect and encourage women to speak up. So I just want to say, like, it is changing, it's shifting, or I'm shifting and staying away from the places.
Leaving the bad actors behind.
Exactly.
There are more women in my company than there are men.
Right on.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
That's great. So thank you all again. We're a little over time, and that's fine. We go where the conversation takes us. So I'm glad that we had this conversation here at the end. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you taking an hour out of your day to spend it with Katie and I. Usually we end these with a final thought and a shot to plug your current project. So we'll start with Amy. Any last thoughts on writing for games, or what are you working on now? Go for it.
Sure. Goodness, last thoughts on writing for games. I don't know. It's trippy. Every day I'm like, this is my job. This is so much fun. I'm glad they pay me to do this. So I am a hearty advocate for writing for games. And yeah, if you have VR anywhere, go check out Airyman Lives. And my little plug is, if you love a game, leave a review, because developers pour so much into things, and then you just sit there and wait. Like, do they like it? Do people like it? Like, and so few people do leave reviews, and that's okay. But it'll make a dev's day if you leave a nice review if you're enjoying something. So my little plug for Airyman Lives, available on every VR platform except for PSVR. But if we do well enough on other platforms, we'll come to PSVR. So tell your friends. All right.
Nicole, when's the next book? Give it to us.
Never.
Book six.
Like, listen, if you email me, I will tell you how it ends. That's where I'm at right now with the final book.
No, don't do that.
Oh, it's the worst. Yeah, I think I love writing for games. I love it. I think that I love dragging people along on little adventures with me, and it's literally the best. It's literally the best job ever. I used to wake up and pinch myself because I was like, this is what I get to do. I get to be creative all day. And listen, there are days when you're just like, oh God. But overall it's the best. And I would highly suggest anybody interested in it to pursue it, because it's, what more could you do? Like, how much more fun could you have than being creative every day? And Amy's right. Leave reviews, even for books, right? Games and books. If you love something, share that, because developers, we live on that kind of feedback.
Yeah, we get enough negative feedback. Leave all the positive feedback.
I think that's
Yes.
the thing, is it's so natural to complain when something isn't working, and that's helpful. Like, we'll
Yeah.
go back
absolutely.
and we'll
Mhm.
fix it. But if you love something, it's not as natural to tell someone, and I'm guilty of it too, to tell someone like, I love this thing you're doing, but it does so much to kind of fill the sails and keep people motivated
And
and
to
moving
make
forward.
more of that thing that you love.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And being a developer has made me more likely to review things because I
Same.
in turn want that.
Exactly. And it
Same.
doesn't make you a shill. I know some people
No.
have this attitude that if I tell you how much I like the game and I'm gushing in it and I'm enthused about it, oh, you're just a shill. No, you're not.
No, just
You're
be
being honest
honest.
and truthful,
Mhm.
then it's exactly what it should be.
If it comes from a place of passion, then I don't think that's a shill. I think that's you just feeling passionate about something that you love and you want to share with people. It's a good
Agreed.
thing.
Agreed. Katie, what are you doing?
Oh, hey, what am I not doing? I literally, it's like a Thursday and I got 2 requests for interviews today. Like, I'm always picking up extra gigs and I'm
Nice.
just having fun. I will repeat, leave reviews. That's a really good one. My index is on order, so I get to play Area Man Lives, and I'm very excited because I haven't seen it since it was in early beta. And yeah, I've only read 2 out of the 5 of Nicole's. I didn't even know there were 5, so I'm going to go and read the other 3 now because I'm
So
excited to
the
learn.
fact
Leave
that
reviews.
you totally spent an hour dragging me for not finishing the series and you've only
And
read
I
2
haven't even
books.
read them all. I know. So I
Damn you,
apologize for
Katie.
that. And I'm looking forward. So just so people know, this is part 1 of a 2-parter talking with writers for games. So I'm excited. But thank you both for being here.
It was lovely to
I
join
love
you.
you all very much. I'm leaving my positive review of you right here. I love you. So thanks for being here. I really appreciate it.
Love you back. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone. And in the positive reviews sense of things, you can actually go to FridayPushToProd.com. We have a little comment section where you can leave feedback, tell us who you would like us to bring on the show, tell us topics you'd want to cover, tell Rick to shut up because he talks too much, whatever it is.
Not
Please
at all.
leave your feedback. We're always happy to hear it. We make this because we enjoy it. We enjoy these conversations. We get to talk to people sometimes that we wouldn't ordinarily get to talk to, or people we haven't talked to in a very long time. So please do bring your thoughts and ideas. We make this for people to listen to, and if we're not doing things you want to listen to, it's kind of no point. So thank you, everyone. Again, I appreciate all of you being here. Katie, thank you for being the world's greatest co-host and guest scheduler ever. I appreciate you more than I can say. Everyone who hung out in chat while we recorded this, thank you. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you for spending your time here. We will hopefully see you again next week. But hey, when you push
It's a
stuff to
long
production
weekend.
on Friday, who knows? Have a great rest of your week, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.